Hello, you fucks. Welcome to John Solo's Beard Brigade. I'm John Solo. You are not, and welcome to Monday. It's the big show. How are you all? This has been an interesting couple of weeks for me. An interesting month and a half, really. I talked about this a little bit, but as you know, see, at the beginning of October, Jody and I decided to take most of October off, and at the beginning of October, we went on a jeeping trip. We were gone for 7 or 8 days or something like that. We came back. We had a few days back in the studio, but then our friend Anna from Germany came over, an author friend of ours, and hung with us for a few days. We then went to GRL. We were going there for a week. We came back. Anna was in town for a few more days. She flew out. And then at the end of October, Jody and I became deathly sick. Deathly is not the right word, but we got sick, like really sick. And we were down for another couple weeks. And when I got back to work, my traditional way of working, I've been for the last year and a half working in Discord every day. I stream my sessions, and I decided to do a change. That's for a number of reasons. But bottom line is, I decided to do a change in the way I work, and I have not been streaming in Discord. So it feels like I'm disconnected from my peeps, disconnected from my group. So I want to tell everyone that normally watches me on Discord, I love you to death. I miss you. I'm not saying I'm going to be doing this indefinitely, but it was absolutely required. I think probably I'll talk a little bit about this with Blake today, but it's required what I'm doing. But that's what we're doing. This week we're working on Ro Horvat's book. It's one of the Winter Sun books. I think it's called Ugly. I just started that today. I'm going to be going back to a podium project, which is the Perilous Courts Book 2. I think it's called Prince in Disguise. I forget. And then I'm moving on to another book this weekend. I think it's going to be a Marie Sexton book. I think one of her Coda books, but we shall see. I'm kind of undecided. I can go in three different directions here. So that's what we're working on this week. We're going to have releases coming out, obviously, on Audible, so everybody can get the stuff that I'm working on. And I think it's it for me. How are you? We're doing rambling as usual on Thursday, so I'll see you then. My guest today, I don't believe I'd met before GRL this year, so I'm going to bring him on. Everybody knows who this guy is. Let me push my button here. Hello, Blake Allwood. How the hell are you?
Howdy, I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. I know we're going to talk about this later, but I just want to get this out of the way. You're in an RV right now. You guys travel the world. You're not really tied to one
Yes.
location. Where are you at today?
Show everyone. I am in Washington State, the Tri-Cities areas, and right on the Columbia River.
Isn't it?
And it's
It feel,
cold.
I was going to
I
say
am
it's getting
ready
a
to go
bit
south.
chilly.
I'm ready to
Yeah,
do. It is cold. Like it's 39 degrees at the moment.
yeah. Well, we're at 31 right now here, and we actually had some schnizzle a couple days ago, and I think we're going to get some snow in a couple days.
Uh,
I'm excited about that.
no, I'm
Um,
ready to go to Arizona. Arizona, here I come. Woohoo!
Now, when you guys go down there, are you using BLM land or are you just going to like the KOAs or how are you working it?
So we do several things. I have a lot of friends that are coming to meet me because, when you live in the Sun Belt, uh, got a place to stay. So we'll be staying in the Thousand Trails campgrounds, mostly this time.
And
And those are really nice. So those have pools and workout facilities. Not that I use them, but they're there. And they have all kinds of fun stuff to do. And
it
I'm
sounds
also I'm like the youngest person there, which, who doesn't love that? I'm the kid.
well. Funny enough, I know what you're talking about. Now, I've not. I don't have an RV. I told you, my wife and I, it's our dream to do what you're doing right now. So I've got a ton of questions that we'll get to. But my band, actually, the band that I run sound for, it's a '60s band. We tend to play for older people. I mean, people that are in
Yes.
60s, 70s, 80 years old, that sort of thing. So we did. I think it. I don't know if it was a KOA campground or what the hell it was a couple of years ago. They have a big, huge pole barn there, and they had like a members appreciation day, and they hired a band to come, and we did it. The average age, the median age in the crowd was about 70, somewhere in there. There were walkers present and that sort of. So I think I understand what you're saying. I mean, I've seen the crowds. You,
It's
you are,
fun. That's a
yeah.
fun crowd. Like
Oh my, they had a
they're
blast.
something. Old
Um,
hippies.
Averill Marie, the world's busiest personal assistant, said that she is in Tucson. You can go see Averill while you're out there too.
Oh,
Uh,
fun. I'm going to do if I can get it set up, I'm going to do the Tucson Book Festival for the
mm,
first time.
nice.
GRL has given me the bug. Now I want to do signings and all that kind of fun stuff. So I
Is
hope to do the Tucson Book Festival.
now that was not your first
We'll see.
GRL. You'd done a GRL prior to that,
It
right?
was. It was the first signing I have ever done.
Really?
So I
Uh,
released my first book in 2019, and
mm,
then um, I'm not the most extroverted person in the world anyway, but um, by the time it was getting to the point where I would be going out and actually signing books and meeting fans, COVID,
mm-hmm,
it put everything, it ended it all.
mm-hmm.
So I happily sat in my little RV and rode away. But this was my very first event. I had never signed a book for a fan before this event.
How was this is such a broad question. I know that you're going to say it was amazing, but I mean, how was the experience for you with GRL? Was it overwhelming? Was it just like you thought?
Yes, yes. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying because I I'm what you call an extroverted introvert. I
Mm-hmm.
love people. I want to be around them, but then I want to not be around them.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just described every author on the planet, by the way. So that's not special or new. But I I it was a lot of people, and I'm used to COVID. My little world. I might see
Mm-hmm.
one person a day, if I see that many, to 300 and something. It was a lot. It
Oh yeah.
was
I
great. I
well,
don't mean to sound like I didn't love it because I did, but it was a lot.
oh no. By the end of GRL for me, I can absolutely be the extrovert. I've been in entertainment since I was a small child. It's what I do. But by the end of it, I'm all peopled out. I'm ready to be done. That's all there is to it. But uh,
Yeah,
what I find is my
lost you.
attitude changes over the course of a GRL or any of these convention events. The first day or two, I am buzzing around like a bee. Just I'm not in one place. I'm just around, around, around. And by Saturday or so, I have Friday even. I've kind of settled in. I'm just trying to chill with these people. I've signed everything I'm going to sign. This is where I'm going to be. You can find me here. That's kind of where I get to. Now, I
It was the opposite for me.
yeah. So
The
you
first
you
couple days I hid, literally hid. And then my husband rescued me and says, "You look like you need a break." Like, I need a break. So we ran to the beach and spent
hmm
a morning on the beach. And then I was okay. And then
hmm
after that, I settled into it pretty well.
Was there like somebody that you met at GRL, an author perhaps, or even a fan that you kind of fanboyed out on that you were just amazed, shocked, I mean, in awe kind of thing?
More than one. Um, I, well, so I knew that this would happen. I'm drawing a blank,
hmm Yeah, it
but
happens.
several authors that, oh gosh, it's part of it's just who I am. Um, I don't even bother. It doesn't even bother me anymore. It's just so common. But yeah, I mean, I met quite a few of them, and these are people that I read when I first started, even before I released my first book, and
hmm
so it was really interesting to get to know them on a personal level. I also, authors that I have developed friendships with, Facebook friendships, but definitely friendships. Um, and I've never met them. Shane Morton, for example. And I mean, we clicked just like I knew we would. I adore that man. Um, and there's several others. We could just sit here and just list authors, and I'd be like, oh, I love them. And, yeah, it'd be boring though.
Well, Shane in particular, Shane's good people. I had not met him
Yeah.
until last year. He was one of the crazy people that accepted my invite to my hotel room because last year I was doing Talk to the Beards live from my hotel room. And I was
Oh
doing
wow.
10 to 12 of them a day. And Shane
Oh
was one of the
wow.
ones that
Oh, that's a
showed
lot.
up. It was, see, that was my way of doing what I do. I was able to hide in my hotel room. So I was only exposed to,
Yeah.
some people instead of all the people. And it was a ton of fun. But yeah, Shane's good people. I really enjoyed him immensely.
Yeah, me
I was talking before we went on the air, and I wanted to see how you do this. I've made a discovery in my the way that I treat the way my work process, my workflow is happening in my audiobooks. I got to a point in reading audiobooks where I was becoming disconnected from the material. There's a situation that a lot of us hit in our career. I know audiobook narrators hit it. Pretty sure authors do too, where you've written a few books, let's say. I'm pretending I'm an author for a second here. I've written a few books, and I've discovered I've hit onto a formula and it works. People like it and it's selling. And I pretty much enjoy it. So you try and at that point to speed up the process slightly. This is what I've got now. I know the formula. Let's multiply this by 50 and I'll have the money I need. The fans will be happy. I'll enjoy myself. So you start to
Yes.
work through and almost make kind of an assembly line happening of how you're putting together your projects. What has happened to me is I've become a bit disconnected from the projects themselves because I created an assembly line. That happened. Is anything like this happened to you? You've got quite a few books under your belt now. Are you still following a formula, or is it still fresh every time? How's it going?
So one of the biggest critiques I get, I know a couple authors that have mentored me and have been so generous. Um, but the one thing that they keep saying is that you need to develop a brand and stick to it. Now that is not my way. I'm ADHD, I'm OCD. I'm just all over the place. So no, I don't create one specific thing and then stick to it. I need to. And I'm working, trying to become a little bit more consistent in my writing. I'm more likely to write a fantasy and then a really, really sweet, gushy, high romance, and then go to a sci-fi.
Hmm.
I don't stick with one thing for very long. However, one of the things that is beginning to show up in my writing, now that I have so many books out there, is I am beginning to see trends. So
Hmm.
I have a contemporary romance trend, I have a suspense romance trend, and I'm beginning to develop my urban fantasy and paranormal trend, which I am loving. That's what I'm enjoying the most right now.
I absolutely eat up urban fantasy. I also some
Me
people
too.
I've had this question before, so I wanted to define for the crowd. Urban fantasy is a let me see if I can define this in a simple way. It's a world just like ours, typically. It might be in a time set before or after, but typically it's in a world set just like ours, but there is something different. A great example of this would be Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Hey, there's vampires in the world.
Mhm.
I produce a series
Yep.
called Bubba the Monster Hunter, which is very much like that. It's an urban fantasy. It gives the creator of it, and sometimes I kind of get to be a creator as an audiobook narrator, gives a creator
Yeah,
something
you do,
different,
I'm
something
sure.
with flavor. And they are, man, I love them to death. I think that you hit on something that I'm going to push back for a second to you, but only because this is what I'm going through in my career. The art has to be more important than I dare I say, even the fan base.
Then the
Um,
Bills?
it kind
My
of, sort of,
husband would
yeah.
disagree.
Kind of, sort of, yeah. I'm hitting that myself.
Shall we bring him
Um,
in here and see his opinion?
I I'm just I'm hitting this point where like if I'm not loving it and I it doesn't the material is almost inconsequential next to just my buying into the material itself, my finding my little piece of how I can affect that and be John Solo with it. If I'm not loving it, if I'm not digging it, if I don't know where I want to go, and if I don't enjoy the process, it almost isn't worth it to me anymore. I would encourage you, Blake Allwood, and this is probably the worst advice you'll ever get, and you didn't even ask for it, but man, make your brand doing exactly what you fucking love. It just doesn't seem to be
Honey,
worth
did you hear that?
it. And by the way, I've never had a person in the industry tell me that I'm right about this. It's
No, probably not. But here's the thing. There are professional writers, and then there's people like me who fell into it by accident.
mhm.
I'm sure if I had that English degree, I would probably be much more likely to be a consistent writing, creating a formula, like you said earlier, which is the desired way of doing it. I am still finding my way. I mean, this
Mhm.
is an exploration. I'm 51 years old. I didn't start writing until I was almost 50 years old. So I'm in my second childhood here. And so I'm doing this 100% because it is a good time.
Mm-hmm.
is what I can do. I can explore the world. I can do things I've always wanted to do that I probably will never do in real life,
Mm-hmm.
but I get to learn about it and I get to put it into action. And so, yeah, I'm I doubt I'll ever be that kind of writer,
Good for
although I really
you.
want to be.
No, good for you, Blake Allwood. What world did you come from? Did you have a big professional career that you retired from or anything like that? Were you a hobo? What did you do?
A little bit of a hobo. So I started my career as a teacher, um, and I lasted a short time. I didn't last very long. It was a lot. That's an intense world. But I taught kindergarten, and then I taught first and second grade multi-age. I followed my kids up, and then I was done. Um, Made great friends. Some of the teachers I work with are still friends of mine 20 years later. Um, After that, I became a full-time foster parent. We were the first gay couple to have foster children in a very red state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that ended about how you would expect it would have. Um, However, there are a lot of gay foster parents in that state now, thanks to plowing that field.
Mm-hmm.
After that, my husband and I went into a tech company, and we did that until recently. And I actually got my master's in healthcare. I have no idea where that fits. Blood is not my thing. Not gonna. No. Mm-mm. However, in the middle of all of that, I did find I loved writing.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have I get to thank my foster son for that one, but yeah, I found I loved it and have gone with it. So that's been my life in a
With
nutshell.
teaching, what did you love about teaching the most?
Oh, the kids. They're so cool. 5-year-olds are cool. I'm sorry, they're cool. They will say whatever comes to their little brains. They spit it right out. They right up, you know. My very favorite saying was I had a student named Kyle, and I had gotten up early. They make you get up really early. That's the other thing. That don't work for me. I'm not a morning person, especially at 24 years old when I was doing it. No, that was ugly. I had gotten out of bed. My hair was not where it should be, and I had a student looked at me. He'd drawn in his little journal a picture of me with hair that was like this much bigger than my little body. And his sharing was, "Mr. Allwood has big hair." Like, I should have saved that picture.
Now, were you
But yeah, the kids are great.
I don't want to delve too much into your personal life here, but being a 24-year-old gay man at the time, were you on the party scene? Were you going out a lot, or was that just
No,
not your style?
no. I grew up. I wasn't. I grew up Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
It was not the Utah Mormon. It was a split off from it that happened before all that happened. But um, grew up very, very, very conservative, very religious, and so I didn't really have access to that world.
Mm-hmm.
I went to college in Lamoni, Iowa. I grew up in Nowhere, Tennessee, and went to college in Nowhere, Iowa, which had fewer people than where I grew up in Tennessee. So no, I didn't have access to a lot of the things that were going on around me, nor did I know they existed
Mm-hmm.
until much, much later in life. So no,
So
I was the proper little school teacher.
what did you like least about teaching? What was your least favorite thing about that? Other than mornings, I get that.
Um, Politics.
Mm-hmm.
The politics didn't work for me at all. It
My,
I didn't realize, because I was a kid. Who knows? Um, but I didn't play it right and got in more than a little bit of trouble. I'm a very
mm-hmm.
opinionated person. I'm not much different now than I was back then. Uh, I have learned to keep my mouth shut a little better, but yeah,
No,
it
I
was
get it.
not the profession for me.
I ask these questions because I want to get to know you better. An interesting guy, and I enjoyed our time at GRL. I also asked specifically about teaching because my wife's side of our family is they're teachers. My mother-in-law is a
Mhm.
retired third grade teacher. My sister-in-law, my wife has a younger sister. She took over my mother-in-law's position at the same school as a third grade teacher. Her
Oh,
husband is
really? That's cool.
Yeah, and her husband was the athletic director for that school. I think he teaches government now in the high school there. So a family of educators on my wife's side of the family. And they're saying the same thing about politics. And I think it's only gotten worse. I know you've been out of teaching for a while, but with the pandemic
A
and all of that
long, long
rolling
time.
down, yeah,
Yeah.
that has only gotten worse. I think you're probably wise to get out. Now, when did your husband come into the picture? Was he already in there when you were teaching? Was it later on in life? Where did he come in?
Yeah. So he came in the middle of my teaching career, and I one of the things that just sent me over the edge is that kindergarten teachers have a lot of early on work. You have to set your classroom up, and there's a lot to set up because you're entertaining 5-year-olds
Hmm.
for an entire day, 8 hours. Their attention spans are 15 minutes at most, so everything has to be about movement, keeping them entertained, keeping them moving. And you're trying to help them learn how to read in the whole process that all of that's going on. So my husband came in and he helped set up my classroom and and of course, so my husband's though most people have met him if you went to GRL, but he's this tall. Back then he had this real curly blonde hair, just cute. I mean, he was cute.
Mm.
He's still cute.
Yeah, I like the
But
word was there.
he
I'm not gonna stress that.
he's watching this too, by the way. Love you, honey. You're so cute. You're so handsome. Um, but all of the teachers, I looked out of my classroom door and like 4 or 5 of the teachers, because I was the only man there, 5 of the teachers were looking at my classroom at my very handsome boyfriend. It was kind of fun. I liked it.
That's coming from the South, from Tennessee. All of this must have been. I mean, I've been to the South. I'm in Ohio, and I actually go to Tennessee constantly. And although it's a much different place than it used to be, going to Tennessee or even further south 30 years ago, that was a different world. You didn't say things like
It
gay.
was.
You didn't. Those were not accepted premises in the South. How did you deal with that? I feel like I'm backtracking into your life, but I kind of want to know: were you out at an early age in school?
Well,
Did you
it's
just
actually
keep
a
it hidden?
no. There was no coming out. I didn't know what that was. So in this is the 70s. I grew up in the 70s and was in high school in the mid 80s. I graduated in 1989. So that gives you an idea of when I existed in that part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You heard the word gay. I mean, everyone would call you gay. I knew it was some kind of derogatory thing. I didn't really quite understand why it was derogatory. We talked about blowjobs, all of that stuff came out, but nothing registered in my very thick ADHD brain. I was existing on a different plane. I was just trying to survive, really, just like every other kid at that time. I grew up in a very tiny county. Like it's a small one of the. It's not the smallest. I looked it up recently. But it was one of the smallest counties in Tennessee. And I had gone to school with the same people from kindergarten to the end of high school. So we weren't really exploring sexuality. We weren't
Mm-hmm.
really exploring each other either. There was a few people who dated, but for the most part, you don't date your brother or sister.
Mm-hmm.
Who? Then this is what these people felt like to me. So it wasn't until I got to college and I ended up having this bizarre relationship with this poor kid. Oh my God. You feel so sorry for people when you look back and you're like, oh, I was this confused 18-year-old and I'm in college in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, and this really cute guy befriends me. And I have no idea that I'm gay. I didn't know what that meant. And so I'm in therapy, and my therapist goes, honey, I think you're gay. And I go, I don't want to dress up like a woman. I know that that sounds offensive now, and I apologize to all the people who like to dress up differently, but that's what I thought gay meant. I was so confused. Oh my God. The only reference that I had to gayness was We were in New Orleans. I was 7 years old. We were driving this ugly black converted van. It was black with orange stripes. It was just horrible. And we were driving in the middle of Louisiana, and this uh, drag queen, bless her heart, she had on a yellow leotard, was huge. This is 1978. Give you a time reference here. Huge purple uh, polka dotted leotard, yellow leotard. And girl, she needed more friends that could help her because that was not pretty. And my dad said, "Hey, look at that gay guy." And so that's the only reference to gay I had. And
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, I don't like yellow.
Oh
When
yeah.
my therapist said, I think you're gay. I don't like yellow, and purple polka dots don't work for me. It's I don't it doesn't fit the complexion.
Well, this fits
So
absolutely into the stereotypes that were happening in the South at the time. In Ohio too. My two
oh
references to
yeah.
gay before I was in my 20s, my two references were one, we had an uncle who was a pedophile, but he liked to touch little boys.
Yeah.
And I that was one
Lovely.
reference that I had. He liked to touch little boys. That's
Yeah.
bad. We thought that was gay.
It is bad.
Well, you
Yeah.
sure it
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
but
we
that
did.
was one reference, and the other was the one. My high school, I was in a class of about 65 to 70 kids, somewhere in there, pretty small
Okay.
school, and one of the boys was the majorette, and he it was still in question if he was gay or not, and this kid was just absolute balls to the walls gay. There was no doubt, but we still questioned it because we just didn't have a reference in our brains about it. So I get
No,
I
no.
think I can put that in reference. So please go back. You've had one reference to a gay person. You're telling the psychotherapist that you don't like yellow. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so she laughed and she thought that was quite funny. And she said, "Honey," I'll never forget. She says, "Honey, that's not what that means." And then she explained, and I'm like, "Really? You can do that? Really? Yeah, that sounds about right." And then from then on, I was like, "Yeah, I like this."
Mhm.
I'd had a really, really, really bad relationship with a woman about that time, and it was ugly. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why anyone wanted to do that. So yeah, my coming out process was rough, and it wasn't just rough on me. It was rough on that poor guy who was just trying to be my buddy. Oh, I
Mhm.
feel so bad. Sorry. I would say his name, but then I think that would be worse. Sorry, friends. I didn't mean it. I'm better now. Anyway,
Do,
yeah.
do you find yourself exploring these topics now in your books? Have you in the past? Hard coming out,
Oh yeah.
small towns where they don't understand. Has that
Oh
been
yeah.
something?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the world's different now. I mean,
Hmm.
no one doesn't know what gay is. I don't
Hmm.
care how conservative. I mean, even the people in the backwoods of where I grew up in the middle of nowhere with no internet, you say something about being gay, and these kids are like, "Oh yeah, I'm that way," and they'll tell
Hmm.
you all these. I mean, they don't. No, different world, not the same. So when I write a book, I have to take that into consideration, unless I'm writing a book about the history. Um, it is a little disconcerting that the books that I'm writing now, my age are grandparents. So yeah, that's a little bit of a shocker.
Well, a lot of
But yeah,
authors
some of
I've
the
found
times when I bring guys in,
a lot of authors talk about there's a lot of 20-year-olds that I found in MM romance, and oh, while so be it, there are 20-year-olds out there and
yeah,
everything like that. Looking around at the general age group of the crowd at GRL, let's say for instance, I would say writing about a 40-year-old, a 50-year-old would be perfectly appropriate. I think that's something people would like. Have you found
sure.
yourself doing that?
I did it in the first urban fantasy book I just put out this year, the Witch Brothers saga.
Hmm.
They are older, but they're in their 40s.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm going to tell you, I've wrestled with this. Why don't we have 40, 50-year olds falling in love? And I finally came to terms with what's going on and why I myself, and as well as I think a lot of other authors, write that 20-year-old, um, because most of us experience that first level of love, that high love, that really bonding love affair. That's
Mm-hmm.
usually in your 20s. That doesn't, I mean, right now, if I didn't have my spouse, I'm going to tell you, I'm not interested in all of that. That's a whole bunch of emotions, and well, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not gonna.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty sure if I did not have the spouse that I have now, I would just be a happy, grumpy old man who lives here with my dogs and writes books. Because I don't think I will ever. I don't see that being for me. And then I talk to a lot of older men too, because that's mostly who I see on the Facebook chats now that I'm
Mm-hmm.
in. And they're about the same. They're like, I'm interested in a relationship, but I'm not willing to put all that in it. Romance books has a lot of drama, and so you
Mm-hmm.
you have to you have to have people who are willing to have drama, and it seems to be the earlier ages that are willing to play that game.
There's also a disconnect. Now, I'm not saying this is true for everyone. I was a fucking idiot when I was in my 20s. Just an idiot.
Me too.
I,
Me too.
but you ask me about it. If you would ask me in my 20s, what are your faults? And I would say, I only have one, and it's my humility. I was just an idiot and an asshole. And oftentimes I feel that in some of the books that we've read, someone in their 20s is portrayed as having the youth of a 20-year-old but the knowledge of a 50-year-old. You know what I mean? Which is a disparity in my mind between the two. Um, I get we're writing fantasy here, even if it's a contemporary romance. It's still fantasy, but at the same time, I
Mhm.
like when I'm acting as a 20-year-old. Sometimes I'm like, this dude is the most mature, developed punk 20-year-old I've ever met in my life. It's it's what you hit on something there that I cannot ever pass by because I'm a fan myself. What kind of dogs do you have with you?
Oh my goodness. So I have a 17-year-old Jerk Russell terrorist, and I did not mispronounce that. He is a brat. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting here looking at him right now. He's literally bouncing. So he's 17. So he's like, I ain't going out no more. I'll pee when I want to pee, and I don't really care what you think about it. And if he could flip me off, he would have already flipped me off. But he's like, you don't care. So he has a little. He owns like a quarter of my RV living space, where we have a little fence, and he has a little pad, and he has this little heating pad because he's 17 and he's grumpy and he's old,
Mm.
and he has his little beds and everything's the, so if you hear anything going ding ding, that's him bouncing on his cage because he's mad at me at the moment because I'm not paying attention to him.
Yeah, yeah. Jack Russell
So
Terriers are
that's
some of
one.
the smartest dogs I've ever met in my life. My parents have had a Jack Russell Terrier, and they're just incredibly intelligent, full of personality. So I'm sure that he does rule out roost. What's the other one?
So the other one is the sweetest dog that has ever lived, and he's a Siberian Husky mix with what we don't know. But he's just a lap dog. He's a 60-pound lap dog. The jerk Russell will growl at you if you look at him. Like he
Mm,
doesn't want you to touch him. Don't touch me except when I want you to. He's a cat that got stuck in a dog's body.
mm.
For real. This dog is not real keen on being a dog. Um, but the other one, who's 60, actually he's probably 70 pounds now because he's like his daddy's gained a little weight. He thinks he should be on the lap. And I'm like, baby, you don't fit. You don't fit on the lap. But he does. He ends up getting on the lap anyway.
Mm.
So those are the two very, very different dogs that I have, which are very spoiled, both of them.
Is it
It's
a
pathetic,
challenge
actually.
living in an RV with two dogs?
Nah, I mean, it can get smelly if you don't clean them up a lot frequently.
We're
Vacuuming is like a daily job here.
I'm so used to we go our traveling adventures right now consist of two Jeeps, and we go off road. We will go off on the side of a mountain for a week at a
Fun.
time
I
exploring
love
and
that.
that sort of thing. It's
Uh,
it's it's adventure. I like adventure. That's what I enjoy greatly. So I keep on.
yeah, me
We've
too.
taken the dogs with us before, and the issue tends to be we have a Siberian Husky named Rogue. She is 75 pounds and a sweetheart, but she couldn't care less what you want. She just couldn't care less one way or the other. She's going to go do her thing. And then we have a husky
They're
mix, and
stubborn.
Oh my goodness gracious, yes. The other is a husky mix, smaller, maybe 50 pounds somewhere in there, and she is an absolute lover who is attached to your hip the whole time. That's where she's at. Um, but
Yeah.
you get on the side of a mountain. There's bears, there's rabbits, there's
Yeah.
snakes, there's
Coyotes.
anything. Yeah, anything you could
Yeah.
possibly think of, and Rogue wants to go find them all. That's what you let her out of the
Mm,
jeep, and she's like a bullet, just boom. So that's no
yeah.
fun.
Well,
What is
no,
your
it doesn't work.
what's your writing day like? Because you guys are kind of ensconced in a campground here and there and everywhere. What how do you work this? Do you have a set routine? Do you just write when you feel inspired? How do you work it?
So I mentioned I'm ADHD, so there's no routine. That's not,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't happen. What I tend to do is I tend to get on Facebook. If you want to find me on Facebook, it's almost always in the morning. That's where I get on and have my coffee. And plus, my PA is from India and 24-year-old guy. And he and I just argue like I don't know, I don't understand it. I swear the kid thinks he's my son. So it's this constant grumble, and I'm like, listen, just do what I tell you to. It is not different than my kids, really. It is the same.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my morning, grumbling at my PA, and then him going and doing what he finally agreed to do. Anyway, in my life. Anyway, so then around noon, 1 o'clock, I'll start writing. The good thing is I have the kind of ADHD that is super focused. So when I start to write, I can write forever. And sometimes I write 8, 10 hours at a time. Um, I've got a project now that I'm really into. Um, uh, I'm writing with a group of authors, and that one I can. It's hard not to write when
Mm-hmm.
I'm in that one. So I could probably do that one for up to 10, 15 hours. But then when I'm done, I might not write for, a week or two. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no rhyme or reason.
I appreciate what you're saying. I'm sure I have ADHD. The problem is I'm not going to go get diagnosed because typically they want to give you medication, and I'm a recovering alcoholic and
Yeah,
addict. I'm
I
not
don't
going to
take
take any of
medicine.
the drugs you give me. So
Mm-mm.
nope, sorry, can't do it. I
Nope.
operate much
I,
the
but
same
at
way.
50, but at 50 years old, I, and that's my age. I've already done it. Like I've been living 5 decades with this thing, so I
Hmm.
know pretty much how to control myself. I know how to focus. That doesn't mean I won't ask someone 15 questions with the word sitting, a paper sitting in front of me that has all of the directions. And then I'll look at them and go, what about this? And it'll be right there. It drives people absolutely insane, but it is who I am. The other thing that really helps is caffeine. So
Hmm.
they medicate ADHD with stimulants. So
Hmm.
um, Adderall is a stimulant. Ritalin is a stimulant. So actually, I think they're about the same thing. Uh, so I found I just medicate it myself.
Hmm.
Caffeine is a stimulant. So I drink a lot of caffeine,
I
and it
drink
works for me.
I drink
Um,
black coffee all day long. That's my beverage of choice, black
yeah, it
coffee,
works.
and yep, I from sun up
Mhm.
to sundown, I will have black coffee in a cup. I probably end up drinking maybe 3/4 of a pot a day to a pot a day, somewhere in there. It's not like I'm slamming this stuff because it really doesn't. I'm sure you are the same way. I don't get a jolt out of drinking a cup of coffee. There's just that's not the way
Me
it
either.
works. Yeah.
I
Um,
will get to shaking if I drink too much, but it takes a lot to get there.
Man, I wish I could drink that much coffee at this point, but it's not going to happen. Lotta asked a question that I thought would be interesting for us to talk about on air, and I hope I'm not going to make you uncomfortable here. Lotta asked if you plan on making any books in audio. Now, I'm going to start this conversation by
Yeah.
saying that Blake has actually approached me about producing some books in audio, and
Hmm.
this is an interesting discussion, and certainly to have with the crowd because um, there's a lot that goes into putting a book in audio, and
There is.
it's a huge
Yeah.
investment. I know we've traded emails back and forth. Um, if you could kind of expound on why you would want to go into audio, what your reservations are about going into audio,
Mhm.
and please don't pull any punches. We're all friends here.
Well, there's no punches to throw. I will eventually do it.
Mhm.
It's going to happen. There's a reality of cost, and I'm still a baby author, and I released my first book in 2019. I released my second book at the end of 2019. Everything else I've written has happened since 2020 until now. So
Mm-hmm.
3 years is all I've been in the industry. So a lot of people are just now beginning to find out I exist.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, I don't have the numbers yet to support doing a lot of audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the very beginning of my career, I sat down. Well, actually, I talked to him on the phone. One of the authors that have quite a few audiobooks out, and she helped me navigate this conversation. And she says, this is not going to bring you a lot of income.
Mm-hmm.
And where do you want to invest your money? And she helped me figure out at that time where I needed to put the money is helping people find me,
Mm-hmm.
helping people see me, and learn who I am. GRL helped a lot of that. Like I have a lot more people who go, oh, there's a Blake Allwood in the world.
Mm-hmm. It really
So
does.
I anticipate within the next probably 12 to 24 months, I'll be knocking at your door going, John, it's time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like I said, I'm still building um, that fan base, and so yeah, I think the formula that someone kind of helped me say is, once your book is actually making a certain level of revenues, that's when you really should start thinking about turning it into audio because that's a whole different group of readers
Mm-hmm.
or listeners, actually. It's like television, so it's a different set of people. You've got your readers. There's some carryover between readers and audiobook listeners, but that is its own industry. And then movies would be its own industry. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
one day I might go there too.
There you
But
go.
yeah, I'd say next year or two,
I think that
maybe.
uh, you've got a really good head on your shoulders. One of the things that I am blessed to do is to I've been in the industry about 10 years, and I, at this point, get a lot of new authors or newish authors coming to me saying, I would love to go into audio. And one of my first responses, typically, if I do this right, is what's your goal? If the goal is monetary, it's a very different conversation than your goal being, I want to expand my crowd, that sort of thing. If the goal is monetary, audio is an expensive proposition. I tell everyone it typically takes most authors 12 to 18 months to make their money back on one audiobook, and that's if you're lucky. Now, I've seen it happen in 30 days. I've many times, but man, that is not a guarantee. It's just not, and that typically takes a combination of a really high selling book along with a really high selling narrator in our industry. In the romance industry, the narrator matters. People will actually follow narrators, so picking a narrator that
Yeah, which is
has a
awesome.
name, yeah, and this doesn't happen like this in other industries, at least some of them. If you're going and reading nonfiction, for instance, not a lot of people follow nonfiction narrators. That's just not the way it works. They're buying the book for the topic of the book. They're not
No,
buying the book for the narrator. Not quite so sometimes in the romance industry. But there's another factor here as well that we discussed a lot, and that is a series. Audiobook listeners are much like readers. Some readers won't touch a series if the series is 2 books in and they know it's going to be 6 books. They won't touch it because they can't binge it. This is a binge society these days. They want to do that.
it is.
By a lot of newer authors will do something I call test the waters. They'll dip a toe in. They'll decide to do 1 book in a 6 book series, seeing if this makes its money, then I'll move on and do the next. You're going to lose every time. You're going to
Yeah.
lose. It's
Yeah,
not
I
going to make
wouldn't.
its money.
I mean, and honestly, John, I would not. I'm a reader. I'm a listener. I
Hmm.
love audiobooks. I love to read books. If the series is not out, I don't read it. I'm just the same way as everyone else. I don't want to take a chance without the books being done. And I don't care if you're a new author or Nora Roberts. I want all of them done
Yep.
before
Yep.
I jump in.
Well,
And
George
it's
R.
the
R.
same with
Martin
the
kind of
audiobooks.
George R. R. Martin killed us all. That's that fucking
Yeah.
cock tease. That's what he did. The fact is to invest in, let's say each book is 50,000 words, and let's say you get a 6 book series, you could buy an RV, a cheaper one for the amount of money it's going to take you
Yeah.
to produce that audio. So
Yeah.
it's a large investment that you have to make. So I'm trying to give the.
Yes.
I thought this was an interesting conversation to have with the crowd. We haven't done this in a long time on the show, but a lot of the crowd are authors, and a lot of the crowd has the same exact question. And the fans here that watch this show are educated fans. They're super fans. So they know the inside of the industry just as well as many of the authors do. And some are crossovers. They were
Yes.
fans, now they're authors. Thought it was a good conversation to have, and me and you had it via email. And it sounds like you got your head on your shoulders right. From my perspective, I would much rather tell somebody in your position, why don't you hold off just a little bit? Let's just hold off because it's easy for me to sell a product once. I'm really good at what I do. It's really easy for me to say, yeah, let's do your audiobook. But what I try and create, and what most of the narrators in our industry, because to be quite frank, we got some really good guys that are working in this industry. Most of us are trying to create success for our clients, so we have a client for life. That's the idea. So yeah, thank you for having that conversation. Thank you for being so open about it. I didn't mean to make it awkward, but I thought it was good to have in front of the crowd.
No, not awkward at all. I will say this, one of the things that could happen, and I think Patreon is a good option. So
Mm-hmm.
if authors wanted, if you have an author that you love and you want them to put audiobooks out, uh, show me the money.
Mm-hmm.
I would really recommend you considering supporting an author's Patreon. I don't push one. I'm more of an organic, um, building my audience organically.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to try to produce, after I talk to you, we kind of given some ideas of what could I do to make an audiobook now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would take something like a Patreon situation because I don't believe at this point I would make my investment back. I think I'd get close, but I don't think I would get quite there. And so
Mm-hmm.
since I'm planning on releasing, you know, a dozen books next year, that's a lot of money in editing, covers.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
already investing a lot of money in
Oh
it.
yeah.
So yeah, Patreon
Pa-
is an option
Patreon is a
for a lot
great
of
deal.
authors. So
I actually have
it
several
is.
clients that use Patreon to pay for my services specifically. It works out really well, and people can go to
Yeah,
their pages.
I think it
Actually,
would.
yeah,
It's a great. That's a
Susan jumped
great
in and
way to
said
do it. I
Lita
think.
Blake. Lita Blake's a good example, Susan. Thank you for saying that. I wasn't going to say her name
Yeah,
aloud, but
that's
you did,
right.
so I can. She does that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen Lita Blake stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah,
She's
and I
great
think
too.
there's that. She is, and I think that I- you know, when I'm not putting 12 books out in 1 year,
Mhm.
I might be willing to set up a Patreon and make it happen. We'll see.
um, I really appreciate you coming on. You were a lot of fun to talk to at GRL. You've been a great guest. You're welcome anytime. Anytime just please reach out to Trace
Thank you,
if you want to
John.
come back on. We don't really do promotion on this show, but if you got something you'd like to do the rounds on, I'd be happy to have you on. What are you working on right now specifically? Can you give us a title of a book you're working on?
I can. So I will be releasing my Coming Home series, which is a sweet. I wrote it for Hallmark. Believe it or not, I wrote Hallmark a 10-book Hallmark series. And then Hallmark says, we're not publishing anything anymore. So those will be coming out next year, self-published.
That's
So
excellent.
starting in February.
That's awesome. Have you actually? I mean, have you tried? Like, you send it to Hallmark. They say yes, we'd
Yeah.
love to make this, or we have Eric Roberts on standby, or how does that work?
I approached them.
Mm-hmm.
I did not submit it because I didn't get the reception I wanted. I actually submitted these to a different publisher, and they didn't respond either.
Mm-hmm.
But they are a sweet, heavy drama, soapy romance novel. So there's no sex scenes. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's so not what you're used to in the M and romance world. But I wrote it for Hallmark, so yeah. that'll be interesting to see how that works out. It's a fun series. It's called Coming Home. It literally is my world coming back to Tennessee if I were a 20-year-old, 30-year-old coming back to Tennessee today
Hmm.
from, basically as what my life was like before. So it really is exploring the changes that have taken place in Tennessee since I left years and years and years ago.
Dude, that's awesome.
But yeah, very soapy.
Hmm.
Virgin River, people who like Virgin River, um, the this basically soap opera that's on
Hmm.
Netflix. Um, this is very similar to Virgin River, and I wrote it that way on purpose. And
Well,
so, yeah,
I suspect that you're going to be getting a bit more traffic with that book from the show, I hope. But I really
hopefully,
appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Thanks to your husband as well. I know he was on earlier, and I enjoyed him a great deal at GRL too. Enjoy your travels.
yeah.
I'm going to be sending
Thank
over
you.
either myself or Trace will be sending over the YouTube link to you. If you guys are watching us on YouTube, please hit the like button. I'd appreciate that. This is the easy part. All you got to do is wave at the camera and say bye.
Bye.